Hi everyone, my name is Minko Gechev. I'm an engineer in the Angular team at Google. Today I want to give you a few insights about what is coming to Angular version 9. Before that, I want to say a big thank you to all the Angular conference organizers around the world. Currently, we have over 24 annual Angular conferences, and 30% of them started this year. Today, we have the pleasure to be on one of these conferences, ng-Bolivia, and thank you very much for having me. On top of that, we have over 780 Angular meetups worldwide. And often on conferences or meetups, when I have the opportunity to hang out with people, I get the question how to contribute to the community in some way. Because I've been myself involved with the Angular community for over 5-6 years now. And there are a variety of ways. For example, I started organizing a few meetups back then. Like maybe 7-8 years ago, I started organizing the Angular, the Sofia JavaScript user group. Here, when I moved to San Francisco, I took over the Angular San Francisco meetup, and we started organizing it together with Leonardo Designer recently. Of course, there is an opportunity to help with the documentation or write a blog post, help on Stack Overflow. Basically, the ways to contribute infinite. But let me share with you my personal first contribution to Angular itself. It was from 2013, that is over 6 years ago, when I spent hours opening this pull request. And you're going to see what was the change. I'm excited to find something that I can push and like a change that I can make to a large open source project. In the end, that was my change. I just added a single line where I added a missing brace, not to a real source code. I just added it to the JS doc of the interceptors example in AngularJS. Still, I was very excited, and since then I kept contributing to Angular in different ways, being directly pushing code in Angular core or creating my own personal Angular open source projects. We can now move to some updates. That's about the community. I feel very connected to that because I was involved for that long time so far. All right, so what is new in Angular version 8? Today, the main focus of the presentation is going to be version 9, but since ng-Conf, we released a couple of very exciting features as part of Angular CLI. In Angular CLI version 8.3, we redesigned the default Angular ng new application. We implemented an ng-deploy command, and we also improved the speed of our builds, of the builds of the Angular CLI with differential loading enabled. Let us first look at the redesigned application. I bet many of you have created an Angular application by using the Angular CLI. And so far, everything that you have seen was this. We have the Angular logo, and we have the name of the application together with 3 links to the Tour of Heroes tutorial, the Angular CLI documentation, and the Angular blog. It's not ideal in the same time, right? It's just very simple, very plain page, which is not a great initial start with the framework. So since Angular version 8.3, you can now see this. Stephanie Fluin put a lot of effort into making sure that the design of the first Angular experience is very polished. So from here, this not only looks better, but it provides you very good links and very good getting started information. You can, for example, learn how to start with Angular by going to angular.io/start. You can read through the documentation, go to the Angular's blog posts, or see how to get started with different Angular CLI commands. The next feature I want to talk about as part of Angular version 8.3 is ng-deploy. So we have deployment capabilities as part of the Angular CLI a couple of months ago, where you were able to directly deploy to GitHub pages. This feature was great, and it was somehow in use, but at the same time, it wasn't very extensible. We want to support other platforms as well, so we decided to roll it back, just to remove it for a little bit until we are able to rethink it and introduce more flexible support for other cloud platforms as well. Since Angular version 8.3, now we have a deployment command, which works like this. Here we are starting a new Angular project. Once we install all the dependencies, we can just go to the directory ng-add angular/file. This is going to add deployment capabilities to Firebase hosting. Now, when you pick an Angular Firebase project, you can just run ng-deploy. And this is going to produce the optimal production build for your application. It is done. It is going to deploy the production assets to Firebase hosting and share a URL with you. This way, with 3 commands, you can go through to an Angular application deployed to production. And if Firebase is not your favorite platform, that's fine. You can pick between Firebase, Azure, Now by Zeit, GitHub Pages, Netlify. Don't see your favorite platform in the list. It's very easy to extend the CLI by adding your favorite cloud platform to our deployment capabilities. In fact, Johannes from Angular Shure, he implemented ng-deploy starter. Implements deployment capabilities to your favorite platform, for example, Azure or your personal private cloud. We can just clone this repo and build on top of it. That's it. And finally, as part of 8.3, we released faster builds when differential loading is enabled. So previously, we introduced differential loading first as part of Angular 8.0. With differential loading, we were building your application twice, once for older browsers and once for newer browsers. So this way, your applications was going through the build pipeline twice. And this wasn't ideal because it was pretty slow. We were performing a bunch of unnecessary operations, such as the application through the build optimizer or ICE, when we had to just down-level the ES 2015 syntax once. Now with Angular 8.3, we're no longer going through the entire build pipeline twice. We're just building your application once to ES 2015, and right after that, just down-leveling the syntax to ES5. That's it. Enough for Angular 8.3. Now let us talk about the future a little bit. Ivy, I bet most of you are already familiar with, is our new rendering and compilation pipeline that we want to introduce to Angular. It aims to simplify the debugging process. It aims to reduce the memory usage when creating Angular applications, so your apps are going to consume less RAM. We also want to speed up the tests and make your application smaller with faster compilation, improve type checking, and in the same time make it backwards compatible. So we are currently planning to release Ivy in version 9. Excited about this feature, a little bit scared because this is a project that we have been working on like over 2 years now. And this is the current plan, unless we face any major roadblockers, anything that is going to dramatically break everyone, we're probably going to stick to this plan. So far, a few early numbers that we noticed are 38% tests in the framework when we switch to Ivy, and the material unit tests are over 80% faster. We have also lower memory consumption over test runs. For example, the material unit tests are about 91% faster. And particularly about bundle size, because this was our main pitch towards Ivy, that it is going to shrink the bundles of your application. When we're talking about bundle size, from perspective, I personally think about it in the terms of this triangle of the framework bundle size. Usually it has at least 3 sides. We're discussing the tree shakeability of the framework, how easy it is to get only the pieces of the framework that you're actually using in your final application. Generated source code, how much source code does the framework generate, and its runtime. Let us go through each one of these sides and put them into the context of Ivy for a second. First, tree shakeability. This is probably the main point of Ivy. We want it to let you use only the pieces of the framework to get in your final bundle only the pieces of the framework that you're actually using. Once the Ivy compiler takes your template, it is going to generate a bunch of instructions that it is going to import directly from Angular core. The instructions that you're not using, such as, like, let's say, content projection, they're not going to be part of your final bundle because minifiers and bundlers, they know how to get rid of them. And Angular Ivy is built with this in mind. The runtime is the functionality of the framework that performs the actual content projection, let's say, or the actual change detection. The runtime is something that the framework usually must have, or it can be small, but usually the framework has some runtime which needs to perform these common operations, like invoke lifecycle hooks or run the change detection, as I mentioned. So the Ivy's runtime was a little bit bigger than Vue Engine for a while. Now we're in the process of shrinking it down to a size similar to the current version of the Angular's runtime. So in terms of runtime, we may not see significant improvements. But generated source code, well, early benchmarks of how smaller are the Angular applications after they go through compilation with Ivy. And I want to share this chart with you. So a couple of months ago, I did this experiment. I took a popular Angular application and I compiled it with the current version of the Angular compiler and also with the Ivy compiler. Both of these to the original size of the HTML templates. As you can see here, the current version of the Angular compiler is highlighted with blue. Ivy's templates are with red, and the current template is with yellow. So the ng factories generated by the current version of the Angular compiler are about 30% bigger compared to what Ivy is going to generate for you. So our hopes are that most applications are going to decrease in size. In fact, if you install Angular CLI 9.00 next 0, you will be able to take advantage of Ivy today without any additional flags that you need to specify. Next flag, the next tag of the Angular CLI. When you create a new Angular application, Ivy is going to be enabled by default. Issues with this, please file an issue because we're trying to make Ivy as stable. We're trying to make all the final improvements to Ivy before we release it as part of Angular version 9, as we planned for so far. Now, let us talk on a few technical details. So the current version of the Angular compiler is going to take your Angular app or your components, and from one component, it is going to generate a bunch of files. It's going to generate an ng factory file, which explains how to create this component. It's going to generate a summary file that is consumed by different tooling. Going to generate as well a metadata file, and of course, you're going to get component.js and component.d.js. And as part of these files, you need to publish at least 3 to npm. In order to, if you're a library author, in order to make sure that your library is going to work with library consumers, to npm you need to publish the app.metadata.json, app.component.js, and app.component.d.js. Necessary for npm. In Ivy, things are going to be a little bit different. Compiler compiles your Angular component. It is going to produce app.component.js, which is going to introduce as well, it is going to include all the instructions for rendering the template. So we're just going to replace the HTML template with instructions on how to render it. Second file, Ivy is also going to produce app.component.dts. This file is going to contain, of course, the typings of your component. This file is going to contain the typings of your component, as well as some meta information, some metadata as part of your component metadata, such as selector, this, and others. Now, we can notice that there is already some difference. In Vue Engine, we need to publish the metadata.json file as part of npm modules if we are library authors. In Ivy, however, we don't get this metadata.json. So this is something that library authors may have to think about. Version 9, we are not planning to distribute any source code on npm. So the assets that you see that Ivy produced, they should not be part of your library packages that you're publishing to your package registry. We're going to publish only Vue engine source code, and right after that, on top of that, we have built a compatibility compiler that is going to take your Vue engine source code and convert it to Ivy compatible format. To finalize the Ivy's instruction set and eventually move all the libraries on npm to Ivy by version 10. Of course, you don't have to worry for anything of this that I already said, because the Angular CLI is going to perform this automatically for you. This applies only if you're a library author and you're maintaining your own custom build pipeline. Using the Angular CLI with ng packager, don't worry about anything that I said so far. All right, so the final topic for today is Bazel. The build tool that we have been using in Google for the past 12 years. Powerful build tool to build huge, large enterprise applications. Entire monorepo where we have billions of lines of code, and it is rebuilding everything quite often. So a few great benefits of Bazel are that it has truly incremental builds with disk caching. So it is going to build your artifacts once and cache them on the disk, so that the next time when you have to, when you rerun your build, it is going to rebuild only what is required. Bazel also has full stack support. So it does not only know how to build your JavaScript, it knows how to build your C++, your Java, your Kotlin, Objective-C, and so on and so forth. And on top of that, Bazel knows how to build your application in parallel. So it is going to first discover the build graph of your app, and it is going to figure out how to distribute it in an optimal way so that each of your cores of your CPU are utilized. If you don't have enough cores, Bazel is going to run your build in the cloud if you configure it this way. So it is pretty powerful, as you can imagine. And there are already a couple of early adopters of Bazel. So we have Google, of course, which is not very early adopter, given that we have been using it for over 10 years. We have Lucidchart with Bazel. We have DigiOcean, Inverse Microsystems, and a few other startups and enterprises that are experimenting with Bazel and already migrated their Angular build process to it. A few improvements that we saw with Bazel is that, well, our CI time dropped from 1 hour to about 12 minutes, I believe. And in general, because of this incrementality and remote build execution, Bazel can lead to significant performance improvements for large applications. I said large. For small applications, you're not going to see usually huge benefits by using Bazel. If Angular CLI works well enough for you, probably you can stick to what we currently have instead of experimenting with our Bazel schematics that we're going to take a look at on the next slide. I mentioned that you can use Bazel with the CLI, and you can do that by just installing Angular/Bazel globally, and after that, bootstrapping a new application with ng-new, the name of your application, specifying the Angular Bazel collection. This is going to create a new Angular application, and it is going to use our Bazel Angular CLI browser builder. So instead of building the app with Webpack, it is going to orchestrate your build and later invoke either Webpack or Roa, depending on which is the current configured build tool. At the moment of speaking, it is Roa, but we are also thinking of introducing Webpack support into Bazel. Now, should I learn Bazel? As I mentioned, Bazel is a multi-platform build tool. It is going to build your backend and your frontend. So in order to achieve this universality, you need to learn how to configure it in the general case. Of course, the Angular CLI provides this box around it that allows you to use Bazel only by taking advantage of the Angular CLI interface. But some more advanced use cases, you may need to understand how to configure your build, which is through Bazel build files. And this may seem like an overhead initially, And well, I would definitely encourage you though. Use Angular, you don't have to learn Bazel at all. Support seamless builds by using the Angular CLI. We're either going to support zero config Webpack build or zero config Bazel build. So really, you don't have to learn Bazel if you want to use Angular. But is it worth understanding Bazel? In my understanding, it is, because it teaches you best practices for how to structure your build, the foundations of even of computer science, because the build of Bazel is completely functional. It also teaches you skills that are reused across different technologies. So if you are currently using Angular, that is fine. You don't have to know Bazel. Learn Bazel now, you'll be able to build not only your front ends with Angular, you'll be able to build your backends in C++ or Kotlin or whatever language you choose there. This way, you're going to build some transferable skill sets that you can use in different contexts. All right, so that was about Bazel. Now let me just make a very quick recap of what we went through, and I'll let you enjoy the next talk. So we're really thankful to the amazing community with these 7 new conferences this year. CLI 8.3, we released the redesigned ng application and ng-Deploy. So please, if you try these, just let us know what you think. We're following social networks, so if you share your experience there, we're probably going to see it. We are planning to release Ivy as part of version 9. This is stable plan. You can expect Ivy in version 9 unless we have any major roadblockers. We're going to release it then. And also, check out Bazel for builds at scale. Again, if you have a very small application or an application to, let's say, 100,000 lines of code, maybe Bazel is not going to bring a significant difference in your build process. But if you have a large monorepo or an enterprise scale application with hundreds of thousands of lines of code, Bazel is definitely going to make a difference. That was it. Thank you very much.
I'd like to say thank you very much for joining us this time. I hope the next conference you can be here on site.
I hope to.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest
Say
of
thank you
your-
to Minko, please. Un aplauso, por favor. Thank you again.